Okay, the third part of this video for Chapter 14 is going to cover multi-sporting events, some tours, and then factors that affect the attraction of sporting events into local economies. So we talked about single sporting events, that in the America's Cup, Tour de France, FIFA World Cup are all examples of single sporting events. Now let's talk about a few multi-sporting events and tours. Now, there are numerous around the world that host multiple sporting events, so I just want to talk about a few of them. Many of them are categorized based on their foundation, so why did they become? So for example, you might consider a regional multi-sporting event, such as the Asian Games or the Pan American Games, focused on a certain region, a geographical location, and where you're holding sporting events around certain regions. Political, there used to be the Spartacade, which is the Soviet Olympics. Historically, the Commonwealth Games, so thinking of Commonwealth nations, the British Commonwealth nations would then compete in games. Also, there are ethno-cultural games, so Pan-Armenian, Pan-Hellenic, basically all these events that are based on heritage. And then you have unique games, and the games are held based on the uniqueness of the sports, and so we're talking about the X Games or things like that. From an international sports tour perspective, many times we're connecting and organizing independent tournaments into basically annual schedules where you have a ranking system similar to the way that NASCAR has their system where you earn points throughout the season. Same is true for some other tours as well. So for example, there are common tours for golf, the PGA and LPGA tours that go around the world. The beach volleyball, which is the Swatch World Tour. There's also another event other than the Tour de France called the UCI World Tour, where you earn points for winning. Auto racing in the Formula One World Championship, and then tennis is the ATP or the WTA tours, and a lot others are examples of some tours. So how does a country go about deciding how they want to, or if they can, attract an event? And so many event promoters will go around the globe because of the location and the ability for their consumers to get to and from the event. And so I'm going to go through several factors. There's 7 of them that I want to talk about that relate to factors that affect the ability to attract. And this is where marketing comes into play. How do we go about attracting these events? The questions we have to ask. First thing is to create an image for the facility in which, or facilities in which you're going to host the games. And you'll have to make sure that there's a good fit between the image that you have and the image that that event is trying to hold. So for example, when I worked at the Dell Diamond, one of the things we would do is we would bring in different musical artists for post-game. One thing that we as a team and facility wanted to be known as was a family-friendly environment. So if we brought in satanic metal bands, I'm just making that up as an example, probably would not fit with the image that we were trying to do as a sporting event and facility that is supposed to be family-friendly. Instead, we focused more on country music as well as different artists that children knew and that kind of thing. Second thing you want to think about when attracting an event is whether or not that event would attract outside visitors. So do we want people to travel in from outside of our area? The reason we ask that question is because if we look at economic impact studies, which again, economic impact is something that is measurable by local communities, and spending of public dollars is oftentimes done as long as there is an impact from outside of the region. Do we want them to stay overnight? So we're looking at hotel occupancy taxes in cities. Or other types of taxes that the community would get, and how could we accommodate the number of people we're thinking. Another thing to think about is its impact on tourism. So do we want an event that's going to bring in national attention, regional attention, international attention? Those are the types of things you have to ask, and do you have the capability of showing that? The fourth thing is the improvement of the area's infrastructure. What types of events can you support currently? If you brought in 100,000 people, could your community hold 100,000 new visitors, both in capacity of hotel, but more importantly from a public standpoint, the ability for them to get around from one place to another, airport systems, that kind of thing. The fifth thing we got to look at is whether or not we need to improve the management and to attract the events. And so this comes back to the HR part of event management. Do we have the staff to host the event? Can we find enough temporary event and volunteer staff to staff the event, depending on the type of event you have? And then the sixth one is developing a sports, arts, and culture, in that so many times sporting events are now combining all of these things. So can we support non-sporting activities during the matches, during the event? And does that fit with the image of the event and image of our facility or our sites? And then the last thing is, how is it going to impact our local community? Because our local community will likely be one of the ones funding them. And so how do we go about hosting community events that would benefit from hosting these mega sporting events? And so again, this chapter was hopefully good for you to understand the differences in the types of events, give you some examples of events and how we categorize them between single and multi-sport, talking about sport tours, and then also how do we attract these sporting events.